Welcome to Focus on the Five, conversations with Baldwin County business leaders and entrepreneurs, brought to you by Josh Knoll of Gulf Coast Financial Advisors. And now, Josh Knoll.
Hi everyone, welcome to Focus on the Five, conversations with Baldwin County, Alabama area entrepreneurs and business leaders. I'm your host, Josh Knoll with Gulf Coast Financial Advisors. Today we are coming to you from the studios of WABF 1480, located here in beautiful downtown Fairhope, Alabama. Anyone that has fished before knows about the big one that got away. Well, my guest today, if you're with him, you've got a much better chance of landing your dream catch. In fact, he just showed me a picture of a pretty big red snapper that he caught at one time. So let's, with all that said, let's give a big welcome to our guest, Captain Billy Howell, the owner and operator of Bent Outfitters Fishing. Billy.
Thank you very much, Josh.
How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me today.
Well, thanks for coming on. Well, I'm excited to talk to you today because I'm, like a lot of people out there, I don't necessarily have the right equipment to go for certain fishing situations. I definitely don't have the patience. And even when I've tried to have both, I've proven historically that I struggle to catch fish. So I love to fish, but I'm really kind of your perfect client in that love to do it, but sometimes I struggle with getting out there and being productive with it. So with all that said, I'd like to, I know that some people would think being a fishing guide is kind of, a dream job, but you and I both know there's a lot of work involved, and I was hoping you kind of walk the listener through what it's like taking somebody like me out on a boat.
Well, you've heard the old saying of how do you become a millionaire as a boat captain or owning a fishing operation, right?
Is that right?
You start as a billionaire. So you're a billionaire, and then boat stands for break out another 1,000. And that's something, that's something that you learn every year as you're going through everything. That I grew up fishing ponds, lakes. We didn't have a boat other than a little 12-foot John boat whenever I was growing up. So we get out there with the trolling motor and get out there and motor around and fish stumps and different things. And then, so I loved bass fishing growing up. We did a lot. Topwater fishing was, one of my favorite things to do. But just being near the water, period. Right. So, never really fished offshore, inshore, anything, with a guide over the years growing up. We kind of stayed close to home. Didn't really travel out of town for vacation much. And then we moved. I grew up into adulthood. We got to, we had a couple of daughters, and we raised them close to the grandparents for a little while, and then I had an opportunity to move to Kentucky for a couple of years with a promotion through my other job, and we spent a little time up there, but it was a little bit too far from the grandparents. They didn't really get to spend a lot of time with both, so we decided, hey, let's move back south somewhere, closer to family, but close to the water.
Right.
So having family down here, my wife's sister, her and her family and her boys and their daughter they were in Mobile, and we decided to move down here. I've been out on the water fishing with him a couple of times. I really enjoyed it and just never got to do it enough. So we moved down here, moved to Fairhope, and probably one of the best moves we ever made, because you're 5 minutes from the water.
Yes.
And you can't beat those views at the pier or views at the bluff in the afternoon for the sunset.
Well, I grew up in southeast Missouri between a lake, a river, and a swamp, so I had plenty of water around, but the problem was for many parts of the year it was too cold to mess with it. And late fall all the way through early spring, there were guys that got out there and duck hunted and things like that, but if you wanted to go fishing, it was a little different story, and I was never an ice fisherman. But for the folks we have a lot of people now that are watching us and listening to us are not from this area. You mentioned Fairhope and the surrounding area. How many options? How often do you get to go fishing when you're chartering?
Well, depending on what type of fishing we're doing, I will get to pick up a rod. Sometimes I'll pick, if we have some people that are new on the boat that don't really know how to cast, I'll help them cast. South Alabama, coastal Alabama, it's got a wealth of areas to fish, different types of fish, different areas to fish. and if you can take into account the offshore stuff, we've got over 10,000 wrecks and reefs that have been put down.
Right.
Out in the Gulf of Mexico, and I mean Louisiana's really an inshore fisherman's paradise,
right.
but Alabama is definitely an
Got
offshore
both.
fisherman, offshore, inshore, best of both worlds.
Well,
So,
okay, let's take our listener through that. Let's talk. Describe inshore fishing in our area around here.
inshore fishing, what most people consider inshore fishing, is within the buoy of going out of Mobile Bay and same in Orange Beach and on down, anything inland from there.
Okay.
And that's really inshore, nearshore. Inshore, nearshore, your different species that you might catch are speckled trout, redfish. In the summer, when the triple tail move in, people target another name for them is blackfish. Real popular, very good eating fish, and people tend to target those. But you can catch everything from a catfish to trash fish to croaker, and for a lot of people that come in, any little thing that gives them a little bit of excitement, especially if they've never been fishing before, kids especially.
Right.
But it's and then offshore fishing. What we really consider offshore fishing is anything really beyond that 3 mile mark, 3 to 10 mile mark offshore. When we go out and we're fishing natural bottoms, we're fishing wrecks that have been deployed, like some of the ships and
right.
barges and pyramids that the state has put out. And if we're lucky, just about every trip we almost stumble across something we didn't know that was there before. So
right.
we just mark it and maybe come back and check it the next time. But there's a lot of people that also fish from the piers around here. Not everybody wants to deal with having to put out all the money that it takes to maintain upkeep of a boat.
Right.
Some people just prefer to be on land.
Right.
And you can see that when you get some of those people offshore that have never done that before. They just they want to do it, they want to try it, but then they get out there and they're like, I think I'm ready to go back to land.
Well, it's a different animal for sure.
It is.
Well, and you hit on something that I failed to take into account when we were putting together the program. I have a friend that does a boat club down in Orange Beach and a couple other areas. I didn't think about that. It's one thing to have the gear and want to go fishing, maybe go from the pier and all that, but it's another thing to not only have the gear, but also have a boat that you can, what was your acronym for boat?
Break out another 1,000.
Break out another 1,000. So you take that into account. I mean, when you compare the cost of boat ownership and maintenance with the cost of maybe chartering, have you had people had that conversation with you before?
I have had that conversation, and actually, over the years where I've sunk a lot of money into either upgrades or
right.
Buying a new engine or having to have something overhauled, I'm like, man, maybe I just ought to sell it all and just, when I get ready to go fishing, just pay somebody to take me fishing, because people think that it's just an easy, fun, it's the life. And
right.
They don't realize just how much work goes into it. You blow an engine, you got a big expense,
right.
But you're taking people out every day. That's the best part.
Well,
it is fun.
Right.
When
a good captain.
when
right.
everything's going well, and when you're actually getting to take people out for their first time, you're actually getting to watch the smiles that this type stuff puts on people's faces. You're making their vacation, you're making their memories. That's the type stuff. That's the reason that I do it, because I know what it felt like whenever I did it the first time
right.
myself.
Well, and I would think that in your line of work, being a good captain makes all that stuff look smooth. So because you have probably a wide variety of people that show up with a lot of different expectations, but probably a mainline expectation is they're going to hop on the boat, you're going to take them right to the fish, they're going to start throwing the line in, they're going to start pulling them out. Is that pretty?
That's pretty much it. And
with no effort, like a duck swimming, you don't see the feet going crazy.
I tell people, and this is, I've learned a lot over this area over the past 7 years, because I've had to get out there to learn where the fish are and how to catch fish here. Offshore has always been really easy, because and you do learn something. You never know what you're going to catch when you go out there, but you can pretty much say, hey, we're going to go catch something today. I can guarantee you we're going to go catch something today.
That's cool.
Inshore, there's a good chance we're going to catch, whatever we're targeting every time we go fishing, but
right.
the sheer number of fish that are offshore that are concentrated around those wrecks and reef,
Right.
it's just like monkeys in a barrel. You get right over the top and whoop, lift them out.
Well, don't you feel like Alabama and all the different organizations have done a pretty good job of establishing that artificial reef system?
Between the Marine Resources Division and CCA and some of the other groups that have just, donated reefs, have kicked in dollars, done fundraisers to help put some of those programs out there. I mean, Alabama clearly has the best artificial reef program,
right.
And that starts with the leadership at the top. Now, I know some of those have been the BP money kind of helped with some of those, right. And we weren't here when the BP oil spill happened. I think we moved here not too long after that, but I've heard it was devastating to the fishing community for a while.
Right. Real estate community, the whole thing at large.
So we're just happy that was in the past. I think the anniversary was last month,
right.
And we're just happy that the area seems to have recovered really nicely since then, because people are definitely starting to come back. And this area sees over 20 million visitors a year. So
right.
We got to have things to do for them and keep them coming back.
Well, okay. So speaking of visitors, that's another thing. On your charters, do you see a mix of local and visitors? What area do you specialize in?
I typically take about 90 to 95% new, not necessarily new customers, but out of town guests. Very rarely do if I'm taking somebody that's local, typically it's somebody's and we're all kicking in on gas and bait and we're just going on a meat haul for groceries, because we, right. Being on the water, catching a lot of fish is kind of taking us from eating a lot of red meat and we still eat a lot of chicken and stuff, but
right.
Fish and pork and chicken has been more of our diet, and fish
right.
a couple of times a week, and access to catching those fish ourselves has really been nice.
Well, and fresh.
Yeah, fresh fish.
For total fresh fish. So, well, okay, go ahead.
But what I was going to say, and I know you and I were talking kind of before we got started today, any fisherman that's experienced knows that your fishing trip doesn't start the day that you go.
Right.
It takes, several days of planning, because down here, and this is especially, something for your people that are listening who don't fish a lot or don't know exactly what to do or struggle at times.
Right.
You have to learn about the tides, because the tides come into play. You have to prep. You got to look at the weather.
Right.
There's a lot of things that you have to factor in the day before the trip versus just going to the garage and grabbing your rods and
right.
grabbing, because you got to buy bait. If you're going to use live bait, there's
right.
so many things that go into it, and I think that's something that people that come fish with us sometimes don't realize. We may spend a couple hours in the afternoon the day before catching live bait to have for the next day.
That's
when
right.
we go out on these trips, and that's after we've already run a charter or maybe right. 2 charters. So there's a lot of extra time that goes into making those trips special for everybody.
All right, and so on that note, I want to circle back around to your boats. But before we do that, we'll do a quick station identification break. For those of you just joining us here on WABF 1480, this is Focus on the 5, conversations with Baldwin County, Alabama entrepreneurs and business leaders. I'm your host, Josh Knoll. I'm joined today by Captain Billy Howell of Bent Outfitters Fishing. All right, so on that note, with the prep that you were referring to, the one thing that I learned moving down here from Missouri, where we were always water people. We always had a boat. We were always out on a lake, on a river. We were always on the water, right? But the difference between, let's say that I had gently used boats, is what I would generally go with, right? The difference between breaking down on a boat in Missouri, on a Missouri lake, is, holler at somebody, they haul you to shore. Or worst case, if you sank, which I never did, but if you did, you swim to shore. Yeah, you swim. Well, that ain't happening out in the Gulf, even the Bay, to a certain degree. So that leads me to what you were saying about the preparation with everything.
Well, you want to always make sure you have your Coast Guard, everything that the Coast Guard requires safety-wise on the boat. That way, and a working VHF. I even carry a sat phone on the boat just in case I'm out of range of any other boats. I can call and say, hey, can you call Seatow for me?
Right.
Or, Boat USA. And, it is nice to have things like that. And we're offshore, I'd say probably of the trips that we run, about 60% of the trips, 70% are offshore, and about 30% are inshore, because we have this area is loaded with great guides, and it seems like they're adding 2 or 3 more every year, maybe a few more. A few more people are saying, "Oh, I want to go do this too," and some of the stuff gets diluted out, and some stay busy. We're starting to build a client list where people are coming back. Hey, we want to come back and go fishing with you next year, and I think that's a big key, because
repeat
we
business.
do have so many people that are within a 3 to 4 hour drive of coming down here to go fishing, and getting that little, I guess, that craving out of the way.
Well, and two, with that, another thing I learned coming down here, and maybe some of your clients coming down, is just how devastating salt water is to a boat. And I thought coming down, yeah, it's kind of cool. Those guys got 2 or 3 engines on the back of their boat. You go offshore one time, and you're like, yeah, I ain't going out here without 2 engines, because you run twins on your offshore, right?
On our offshore boat, we have a 28-foot offshore. We started when we started 4 years ago taking people out fishing. Had a 22-foot center console, 1 engine. Right. Furthest I ever ran was like 28, 30 miles, something like that, and I was a little antsy about going any further than that with just the 1 engine, because once you get out a certain distance, there's a good chance you might be out of VHF range also. And in a smaller boat, if a storm blows up, you just, if you're in a smaller boat, it's kind of harder to when those waves get big, it can be a little bit tougher to manage. But having the twin engines, it's definitely already coming to benefit a couple of times.
I bet.
Talking about the saltwater corrosion, last year we were out on a trip, had done great. We're fishing, we're catching lots of fish. We actually already had our limits of snapper, and my switch for one of my engines, it had corroded on the back and broke apart, and this is a year old. Right. So this is
that quick
sitting on a trailer for the majority of the winter, or sitting on put up. It just gets in there and it breaks stuff down. So it's really, that's another thing. Before the season, there's so many things you have to check and make sure. And every season we do a lot of fine tuning just to make sure things are like they should be, so we can not have to worry about downtime during the season.
Water pumps getting chewed up.
Last year, we've had instances. Luckily, I have a good friend who knows a lot about boat motors and stuff like that, and we also fish together a lot. And he bailed me out a couple of times last year with a battery switch and with a water pump. He met me down there when I got back to the dock, and we got everything changed. His name's John Wilkinson.
Well, and for people listening that maybe not from around here, you're talking about a fairly new boat. I mean, we're not talking about my old junkers that I would drive in the past.
It's 2017.
Right.
So this will be the 3rd year that we've actually been using it. That was just in the second year, and that's the first time I've had a battery switch just totally.
And that's kind of the point. I think that when people are coming from the area, or not from the area, and they're going out on waters they're not familiar with, definitely you want to look for a guide that not only knows the water, but it's got the right equipment.
And that's another thing too. When we moved down here, I knew very little. I knew what my brother-in-law he did, before, and I just kind of copied what he did. But after we moved here in August. I had a boat by October. I told my wife, I said, we're getting a boat. Right. It got delivered the night before they opened that October snapper season in 2013.
Okay.
So we were on the water that first day with the boat, and the first fish I caught was a big red snapper, and I'm like, all right, I want to go back tomorrow. And then, that I want to go back.
Hooked.
That I want to go back tomorrow turned into about 40, 50 trips a year out on the Gulf. And then she's like, well, how are you paying for all this? I'm like, we're eating fresh fish. So, but anyway, so I said, well, I think I would really like to take people fishing, and she's right. I mean, all the trips that you're making out there with friends and they're just kicking in for gas or gas and ice, that's not helping offset what it costs to run the boat and all the other stuff. She's like, man, I'm going to be running this thing down. So I said, I think I can make this work, and I think I would really enjoy it, and I have so far. But for people that are moving to the area that have never done this type of fishing, I do have a few recommendations.
All right.
And number one,
you and I talked about this.
Yeah. Number one, find a friend or meet somebody who has lived here for a while that loves to fish. And luckily for me, that person was Jeff Vatican. He works at Bass Pro Shops up in Spanish Fort. And I was walking around there looking for stuff one day, and we just struck up a conversation. He's like, oh, well, you want to do this, you want to do that. And he just kept walking through different things. And I said, well, let's go fishing together. And, you know, if you have a boat, invite that person fishing.
Right.
And for me, we've been fishing together for, I guess, going on 6 years now. And, you know, for the first several years, I learned a lot from him.
Right.
Now he helps me out on the boat in the summer. I have kind of deckhand by committee because some people work other jobs.
Right.
And the crew that I've, you know, got that's been able to help me, just a really great crew with people. And luckily for me, it's also been a way for me to spend more time with my daughters because they love being on the water and they know what to do. You know, they've even passed on tips to customers while they were out there about how to catch fish.
How old are they?
You know, one's graduated, one's 20, and the other one graduates next week.
Okay, so that's helped you with your relationship with them for sure.
For sure,
right.
For sure. You know, and once you meet that person that can give you tips and tell you what to look for down here, just latch on to them.
Right.
You know, be their best friend, and you know, but treat them. You know,
right.
take them fishing, and just put time in.
Right.
I mean, you got to put the time in, and you know, there's little things that I learn every trip. Maybe and I've been fishing for 7 years out there.
Right.
You know, you got to get out there and read forums. There's several good forums around here. There's Saltwater Fanatics group. You got Alabama Fleet group. You've got you just got so many resources. There's a surf fishing forum. There's a sword fishing forum.
Right.
There's a pier fishing forum. This area has a lot of resources for people who are wanting to learn how to catch a certain type of fish. And most of the time, people are nice about it. You
right.
get certain people that have to be policed and
That's
comments
everything.
that have to be deleted. But it's social media.
Somewhere.
Believe
right.
me, I got firsthand experience with that last week.
Right.
So, anyway, but I mean that's my biggest tip. Just make a friend.
Right.
That knows the area and knows.
Especially if they know the water, they know the fish, and they can help navigate. So, all right, on that note, these are questions from my wife because she wants to go out on your boat pretty quick. Is there a best time to go fishing down here? Is there a season outside of snapper? We're going to circle around to that.
You know, I'm going to answer that with a question.
All right, go ahead.
Is there a point in every day where you decide that, no, I'm not going to eat today. I'm not going to eat today at all. Because
obviously,
you know,
not.
And I was thinking about that when you were talking about wintertime fishing a while ago. You were talking about, well, we just really didn't. You know, I'm not an ice fisherman. That's the thing about down here. The diehard anglers down here in this area, they fish year round because
right.
certain times of the year, certain types of fishing is
right.
better. Like the inshore fishing in the fall and winters. It's insane, and I really, the last 3 or 4 years, I guess, I've gotten to experience the density of speckled trout up in the rivers and the beauty of the Mobile Delta
right.
Over the past few years, and you know, that's my favorite time to fish. A lot of people would rather fish when it's 80 degrees, 75, 80 degrees inshore, but you know, we love fishing for them in the wintertime because we get to, instead of having to use shrimp, we get to throw grubs and different types of hard baits and topwater. And but as far as inshore fishing, typically, more specifically to answer your question, typically I would say, you know, March through end of May probably for inshore, and then again in October through November, and then it's really good in the winter. It's usually really good in the winters.
Is it?
Up in the rivers as
well.
well.
Well, and we've had our boat out in December and January down here, and it was a glorious thing. I mean, it was like 60 degrees.
But over the past few years, what we've seen is with the temperatures are definitely a factor, and also the amount of fresh water that
right.
comes down. And this is last couple of years, or 2 out of the last 3 years, have been extreme flooding up in the Midwest, and
right.
all that water eventually trickles here.
That's true.
So, and it just seems like every time the bay gets cleared up, boom, here it comes again.
Just
so,
no doubt. That's a great point.
I mean, so but for inshore, I mean, there's always something to catch.
Right.
And the fish are always going to eat at some point. It may not be at 8 o'clock in the morning. It may be at noon. It may be at 4 o'clock. But inshore, you're going to have to ride around and find them unless you've located them, and that goes into somebody that's on the water every day. That's part of prep for the next day. They might not necessarily be in that spot. Well, they're probably relatively, within the same area. Offshore, there are different seasons.
Right.
Like right now, we're almost to the end of triggerfish season.
Okay.
The offshore fishery is really heavily managed by NOAA, and trigger season ends May 11th, and then we really, as far as the primary target fish that people come in our area to try to catch, would be red snapper, amberjack, grouper. Of those, red snapper comes in June 1st and will be open through August 1st or August 2nd, but it's technically midnight of August 1st.
Right.
Which they would just be like clear and say, hey, it ends at midnight on August 1st.
Right.
So, but anyway, and then amberjack is supposed to come back in August 1st and be open through October 31st.
Okay.
So there's plenty of other fish to catch out there.
Right.
Last week we had a trip. We, if you're going offshore and you're reef fishing, you're allowed 20 aggregate, like an aggregate of 20 fish per person.
Okay.
That could be vermilion snapper, white snapper, triggerfish, scamp, and so we had a combination.
Okay.
So each person had their own aggregate, and it was a mix of white snapper, vermilion, scamp, and triggerfish, and it was a nice box of fish.
That
a nice,
great.
20 fish per person. That'll feed.
That gets you a while.
Yeah, feed you for a little bit.
So So speaking of your groups, I mean, how do people meet you to get on the boat? You have a central location where they go, and then we'll talk about what size groups you can handle as we start winding down.
I do actually. I have 2 locations.
Okay.
Actually, for my offshore trips, I actually keep my boat at Caribe Marina in the lift.
All right.
And so we'll meet there down on the dock, load up, and I can take up to 6 passengers, and that's fishermen, 6 customers on the boat at the same time. And I can also have a deckhand in addition to those 6 passengers.
Okay.
We'll leave out. Usually, I try to leave out. It's a little bit earlier toward summer because we're usually running a couple of different trips in one day during red snapper season, especially. So I try to leave the dock around 6. If it's a 5-hour trip, we're back at the dock by 11. We offload. We usually, the deckhand is cleaning the fish, and I'm cleaning the boat, getting ready for the next group, or vice versa, depending on who's working with me that day. And then inshore, we keep our boat, and it's at Fly Creek Marina here in Fairhope.
Right.
So we just meet down on the dock, head out. Usually we're gone 4 hours from the time we leave the dock, unless somebody wants to add a couple hours on, or we're usually pretty flexible time-wise.
How do people make reservations? Well, first, how do they make reservations, and how far in advance do they need to make reservations?
This time of year, if they're wanting to go fishing for red snapper, now's the best time. I mean, to go ahead and get that date secured, because we will book up. I mean, I will have a day here and there that's not booked up in June and July where I might get a free day. Maybe I go fishing, or maybe I just take a day off because I'm wiped from 10, 11 straight days, 10 or 11 straight days of doubles. But that old saying, "I make the money while it's here." That's usually our peak time for the offshore fishing. But I apologize. I had a.
What's all right? Well, no. What I want to ask you was, what's the best way to get a hold of you to make a reservation?
There's 2 ways that I like to communicate with people. Preferably, if people can go through my website, the www.bentoutfittersfishing.com.
Okay. BENT.
BENTOUTFITTERSFISHING.com.
All right.
We have it set up on with the ability to book your trip online. We have all our different trip types, and each trip type explains what we'll be doing fishing, what we'll be fishing for.
Probably the licenses they need to get and all that.
Yeah, they won't need any licenses.
Oh,
so, I mean,
okay.
all they have to do is just show up. We have the gear, we have the bait, we have the license for the boat that covers them while they're fishing.
They just need to walk on.
They just need to walk on. It's just that simple. And then when we get back to the dock, we get the fish clean, put them in Ziploc bags, send them home with them. It's an easy transaction for them, basically.
Oh, yeah.
So that, you know, I wish back over the years that we'd had the opportunity to come down and do that ourselves. You know, pay somebody to take us out fishing.
Right.
You know, growing up, but we never had that opportunity. But
so they get a hold of you. The best way to make reservations is bentoutfittersfishing.com.
Or they can call me on my cell phone at 601-938-7161. I do have a lot of people that will text me before they actually book the trip.
Okay.
And I do have the ability on the website to chat with people through my app on the phone, but it doesn't necessarily always get to me before they leave the site.
Understood.
So,
okay.
You know,
all right. Well, as we're wrapping up, Captain Billy, is there any specials or promos you want to offer?
I think what we're going to do for those who are listening, if you want to book a trip based on what you heard on this show, we're going to offer you an extra free hour of fishing on the vessel. So
nice. Does that apply to the host and the producer?
Of course. Y'all brought me in. We'll take care of you.
All right. No, you did fantastic. Anything else you want to cover? You
Well,
hit all my wife's questions. I'm impressed.
One of the things that I want to brag on Alabama about, and not just because I'm on the cover of this.
You are a cover model, by the way.
We've
you hold it up to the camera.
We've actually had a few photos featured in this over the last 2 or 3 years, and it's really a special program that the Marine Resources puts together every year. So
for the radio listener, what is that?
This is the 2019 Alabama Marine Information Calendar.
All right.
Not every state does these.
Right.
And I believe I was talking to one of the bait shop owners the other day, and I said, "Do you need some more calendars?" And he's like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "You know, as soon as we get them in, they're gone." And I said, "Well, I have a few extra at home." I said, "If you want me to autograph a copy, I'll leave it." Anyway, no, but it has information with the Alabama saltwater license fees, the different licenses.
That's perfect.
It has, if you look at each day, it has a tidal chart when high tide is, low tide, low tide, and then how big of a tide it is, and that's very beneficial to anybody that's going to wet a hook.
That's huge. Wow. Okay, so how does someone get a hold of that, and then we'll wrap the show?
Most of the retailers that sell fishing licenses in our local area still have some of these. If they don't, the Marine Resource Office down in Gulf Shores should have quite a few. Okay. And also on Dauphin Island.
Very good. All right. Well, if you're a regular listener to the show, then you know that we also film our conversation and release it across multiple social media platforms. So if you're watching this video and you'd like to reach out to Captain Billy or myself to send us a message, you get Facebook messages.
Yes,
right? Okay,
absolutely.
Very good. All right. Lastly, if you're a Baldwin County area entrepreneur or business person, you'd like to have a conversation like this one, reach out to us. You'll find my contact info at the end of this show in my disclosure. In closing, I want to thank my guest, Captain Billy Howell of Bent Outfitters Fishing, for joining us today. You did a great job. I mean, you really knocked it out. That's good.
Thank you.
I've been looking forward to this one. As well as all of you all out there listening and watching, I am Josh Knoll with Gulf Coast Financial Advisors. This has been Focus on the 5. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
Good job, Billy. Captain
you.
Billy. All right. That's it.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to Focus on the 5. If you are interested in learning more about Josh Knoll and Gulf Coast Financial Advisors, you can find us at gulfcoastfa.com, call 251-327-2124, email josh.knoll@gulfcoastfa.com, or message us on Facebook. Focus on the 5 is produced by Josh Knoll of Gulf Coast Financial Advisors. Advisory services offered through Investment Advisors, a division of Pro Equities Inc., a registered investment advisor. Securities offered through Pro Equities Inc., a registered broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Gulf Coast Financial Advisors is independent of Pro Equities Inc. Information presented is for educational purposes only and is not an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any securities. Focus on the 5 offers commentary and generalized research, not personalized investment advice. Show content is for informational purposes only and does not constitute a complete description of our investment services or performance. All investments involve risk and unless otherwise stated are not guaranteed. Be sure to consult a tax professional before implementing any investment strategy.